Good morning, guys. This is Howler Mouse coming to you on a cloudy Saturday morning. And I know this is going to be a recorded video, and in the future, you'll get over this next comment here, I guess. But tomorrow is supposed to be a rainy day on a Sunday, and we always know what that means for around here. Rainy days, Sundays equal comic book time. All right, guys. So if you regularly watch this channel, you know that I try to be. I don't really go after people, creators, and things like that. I kind of talk about companies as a whole when it pops up, and I stick to the hobby. And I've always said that the hobby of collecting comic books is surviving because of back issues, in my opinion. Comic book conventions. It's turned into gone back to like sort of a grassroots thing, in my opinion. Yes, people are still buying newer books. Yes, people are disappointed with their newer books. And I always kind of laugh at the irony of when we were getting gluts of comic books in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s mostly, how books had high print runs and over 800 books a month were coming out there at one point during the 90s, that it seems like it's almost like the hobby knew that this would be needed in the future to have those back issues, to have those long boxes at conventions. So as you see where I'm scrolling up and down here, this article came out today. What is today? My goodness. The July 20th at 12:15 a.m. This thing came out 15 minutes after the new day, and I woke up and found it. DC's DiDio on the double-edged success of reprinting old comics. Now, what they're talking about here is, I think it was last year, 2018, that Marvel started doing these reprint editions of comics for $1. Okay? And then they started doing facsimile editions where it was the entire comic with the original ads and letter pages and things like that. Well, DC got on board and they started doing them, and I bought a couple. They're fantastic. And it's really cool to have these reader copies. Now, what I was predicting is I was sort of wondering if we get a facsimile edition here that I have ordered of the first appearance of Ra's al Ghul, as they've used in this border, Batman 232, would that actually make the original comics go down in value? Whatever, I mean, it was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, this is kind of getting interesting. They're doing something new. Let's see what happens. Well, it turns out Dan Didio has something to say here. Um, and he's one of the publishers a co-publisher at DC Comics. So right here it goes, we live in an era where making access to high quality versions of retro comics is easier than ever. This can only be a good thing, right? Well, not exactly, at least according to DC Comics co-publisher Dan Didio. According to Newsarama, while speaking to the fans, Didio pulled the audience of just how many people in the room read these editions. And apparently, yeah, there was a great response. I think they're fantastic. So the big problem is what I've said here. People are turning to older stories. I've seen people they're going back to the older comics where you actually have comic books. They're not decompressed. They're not full of these politics that have been played out. In their comic books and things like that. And people are always sort of like, they come at you. You've seen it. You've seen what happened. If you say anything, if you criticize what they've been doing over the last couple of years, and I mean, it just turns into a mess. It turned into a business where you attack constructive criticism, opinions, and you know, you're not really supposed to say anything. It's a marketing where you attack the fans. It's just amazing, right? So here's what we had to say. We do these facsimile editions where we reprint older issues of comics, including all the ads, and in some cases, they're selling more than the new comics with these characters. People more interested in buying the stories from 30 to 40 years ago than the contemporary stories, and that's a failure on us, referring to DC. We should be focused on moving things forward, always pushing the boundaries and finding new stories to tell. That's how we'll survive and grow this industry. which to me is a, we'll use the word ironic statement because DC has cut, I think it was June of this year, just last month, that they published the least amount of books they had in years. They've killed the Vertigo line and a few other lines because it was mishandled by their editors. Um, that's a whole other video, and it's kind of old news now. Black Label has been a disaster so far. Given all the current shakeups, it's sort of what I was talking about, cutting down the publishing of books and a few other things. At DC, they've tried to realign its current comics output. It makes sense that Dan Didio would at least like to see fans more invigorated by the current creative output instead of flocking to reprinted issues. Now, coming as a comic book fan, this is no personal attacks here, but when people are flocking to these older books, these older storylines, the talent of the people in those books, you're going to have to wake up because it's not people 40 and over getting these books only. Um, Something is missing from comics today, and you guys are not looking into it. I get moving forward and stuff, but what about talent? What about listening to the people who are buying these books? You have comic books that are selling, they're outselling the comics of today in some cases. You're just not getting it. Um, but right there it is. But as more and more readers of all ages come into comics for the first time, having easier access to iconic stories from to access their backlog. It's a valuable gateway to the legacy history behind these current characters and to comics in general. And I would love to know more about more and more readers of all ages. I always hear these things. How do they know? How do they know? I really want to know. But Didio's right in that it's not the only thing a publisher can focus on. There has to be new books and series to keep it all going. If people want onboarding to the current books on offer enthusiastically as they're going to go back to the old comics, that's a problem DC needs to deal with. Is it? And right there, the next article you can link up to is DC Comics just killed its vertical imprint. Uh, I might actually end up doing a video on that I think I did a live show or something. So as I wake up here in bed and do this quick video, it's a case of it's one of the few times I can be like, "Told you so." If you followed this channel um, at all, I've said the back issue. When it comes to the hobby, not oh man, about a year or two ago, I said that Marvel Comics' problem is their biggest actual adversary wasn't Comicsgate, it was their own history of comics. The fact that they are the ones that brought in a comic book universe with a continuity and a history. You know, interact comics that interactive over in that we're in this shared universe that could reference each other with editor notes and storylines and characters and things like that. They've really lifted up the standard. That was their biggest history, and now it's also apparently DC Comics' biggest adversary is their history. They need to go back to what is the hobby, what hooked all those people for years. They seem to be worried about progressing comics and expanding them into the future, yet the money is being spent on the older stuff, and that's how people are speaking. Um, I just don't know if they remember that they're a business. That's what's getting me. Are these companies forgetting that they're a business? At the end of the day, you do still have to do a profit. Um, I just can't see where they're coming from. So I always sort of suspect if Marvel and DC are having to steer themselves from, you know, their marching orders come from above that we don't hear about, if you will. All right, guys, so I figured I'll just share that article here. As you can see, it's io9.gizmodo.com. I looked that up for you. I'm not going to put a link in there because I'm going to upload this and try to go kayaking today if the weather will allow me. So you guys have a good one. Later.